Assalamu alaikum and welcome to session 98 of the Harborne Islamic Study Circle. Alhamdulillah. This week, again, we're still on the Battle of Badr. Inshallah, slightly different this week because it is so pivotal and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does almost dedicate a whole surah in the Qur'an to this. What I thought would be good would be just to go through the Surah Anfal, which is the 8th surah in the Qur'an, and just without doing a detailed tafsir, just go through the verses as they are, and then just sort of refer to the things that have happened in the battle before, during, and after, with reference to how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Battle of Badr. So inshallah we'll spend this week doing that. Next week inshallah we'll finish off Badr inshallah by doing some of the lessons that we can learn from the battle. So just sort of not quite recapping, but just looking at some of the specific lessons and how we can apply them to our time. So it's a sort of a Surah Al-Anfal. It's sort of a middling surah. It's not a particularly short surah. There are over 75, I think there's 75 verses. Let me just scroll to the bottom. 75 verses indeed. And so I'm not going to be reading out all of the verses as they are. So what I would recommend is if you got a copy of the translation of the Qur'an with you there, and just go through it with that. It is important that we do that. So last week we just finished off with the prisoners of war and how they were being treated in Medina, and then we did a little story about an attempted assassination attempt of the Prophet ﷺ by Umair bin Wahab. But we'll, as I say, recap that in more detail next time, inshallah. So Surah Al-Anfal, essentially it's one of those surahs that was revealed on the battlefield. So we've got a lot of references to what's happening literally whilst people are there, and it's quite obvious a lot of the references are to things that happen on the battlefield, and some of them we don't know about. Other things we've sort of got to hear about through the riwayah and people explaining specific aspects. But what we should know is that when this surah was revealed, or the verses were revealed, everybody, certainly amongst the Muslims, knew what these verses actually referred to. So they're quite explicit in terms for the people what the verses are referring to, because they lived it. For us, we have to make inferences, or other people need to tell us what some of these verses are all about. And so it's one of the ways that Allah chooses in the Quran. This is a way to reinforce the aspects of belief amongst those people. So it really makes them more steadfast when they know that things that they have personally been involved in, Allah from above the 7 heavens is talking directly to them about them. And again, it's a tremendous privilege for those people who were around at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, amongst his companions, in his entourage, that they feel that these verses are directed at them, and that they will be recited for all of eternity from there. So again, it's a tremendous weight for those people, and privilege as well. And as we mentioned before, the surah starts off with the fact that the people are quarrelling. The Muslims they've won the battle, and the first thing they do after victory almost is to quarrel amongst themselves, and they're quarreling over seemingly petty things. They're quarreling over the ghanima, over the spoils of war, the war booty. Okay, they vanquish their enemy, and then they're arguing about, well, who gets what share. We were chasing, we were protecting the Prophet ﷺ, we were doing the actual fighting. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah by saying, look, they ask you, Muhammad, about the spoils of war. Say the spoils are for Allah and His Messenger. So he's just saying, look, stop fighting over these things. These things don't matter. Everything belongs to Allah and the Messenger. So reconcile amongst yourselves. Come together, obey Allah if you are true believers, right? So it set the standard, saying, look, don't argue about these things. There's bigger things at play. So that's the starter for 10 almost, is saying, look, you're just concerned about the dunya. Allah is concerned about much bigger things, and this is a theme that keeps cropping back throughout the surah. And then there's ayah 2, Allah talks about, well, the real goal is not the money, right? The real goal is not about the worldly riches, okay? And he's saying that true believers are those that when verses of the Qur'an are recited, their iman goes up. The real goal of this fighting was not the worldly wealth. It was not for revenge. It was taqwa, it was dhikr, it was getting close to Allah. So a real sign of a believer is that you tremble when the verses of the Qur'an are revealed. That's what this whole encounter is all about. Okay, so those the people who have fear in their hearts when his verses are recited, and then perform salah and spend out of what we have provided them, they are the true believers. So again, it's reorientating the Muslims. They're just fresh from victory, and it's saying, look, the real victory is not these things in this life. The real victory is what pleases Allah. Okay. So verse 5, ayah 5, then Allah is talking about, he says, in translation, and your Lord caused you to go out from your home with the truth, and verily a party amongst the believers disliked it. So here we have a different aspect of history being captured. This is Allah as the historian. It's not somebody going around when the battle is done and taking down accounts and possibly putting a different spin or gloss on it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually telling us how it was, and he's revealing the inner truths of what was going on inside the hearts of people, even though they wouldn't want to admit it. So Allah's making it clear here that Allah as the historian, people they left Medina, and this is true, to fight, to get the caravan, to raid the caravan and get the riches from Abu Sufyan's caravan, which was they felt was theirs. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains that there's a group of people, of the believers, who didn't like the fact that they were going to face an army. Right? Now that it was clear that they're not going to face the caravan, they're going to face an army, there was hesitation in some of their hearts, and Allah's revealing this. Okay, and there were conversations. People were saying, even senior elite of the Sahabi were saying, look, we're not prepared for this. Let's just go back and then get proper preparations. Okay, so Allah's not overtly criticizing them, but he's saying, he's giving them a high rank by calling them mu'minun, not muslimun. Okay, so party of the believers, right? He's elevating them for people that have iman. Okay, and this was even after the truth was made clear to them. Even after the Prophet would say to them, look, either the army or the caravan, if we face either, Allah has promised me victory, right? So even though that they were told that they would be victorious, there was still terror in some people's hearts, which is natural. It doesn't negate their iman. This is just a natural state. They're facing an army and there's only a few of them. Okay, and these internal terrors of the heart are being revealed. But the good thing that the Muslims did is they did not vocalize it. They did not act upon it. They did not drag everyone else down, and that's a feature that you find with other peoples whose faith isn't that strong, and this is referred to again in subsequent battles and encounters. And then Allah again in Ayah 7, saying that, and remember, we promised you one of the two parties would be yours, and you wished it was the not armed one, i.e. the caravan, right? But Allah willed to justify the truth by His words and to cut off the roots of the disbelievers. Okay, so a lot of the people, they wanted the dunya stuff, but Allah had bigger plans, and this is to destroy the batil. This was a formidable, battle. Okay, so and again, that's natural. We want the easy route. We tend to take path of least resistance, and it was natural for a lot of the believers to feel that in their hearts. Okay, but Allah had a bigger plan, and He wanted the truth to triumph and to bring falsehood to nothing, even though the disbelievers hate it. And then Ayah 9, Allah's talking about when the Prophet ﷺ, he's pleading for help. This is the night before, and even on the battlefield, okay, just before battle is about to start, we talk about how the Prophet ﷺ put his hands up to the sky, looked, and was begging Allah for help and support, that if these people fail, this could be the end of the deen. Okay, and Allah saying, although the fact that He's already promised the Muslims victory, He answered the prayer there and then and said He will send 1,000 angels behind each other in succession. Okay, and that is to, this good news was there to strengthen the believers. They know they're going to win, but He's saying this, this good news, in order to strengthen them, in order to get the Muslims ready to fight. And it's this sort of psychological shoring up of the Muslims, even though they know victory is promised. By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reinforcing this fact that He's sending 1,000 angels, it makes the Muslims feel better and gets them in the right frame of mind just before they're about to go to battle. And again, Allah's reminding them of the favour. It's not just this favour of giving the good news, when the Muslims felt desperate. Verse Ayah 11, He says, look, you guys were, He causes you to sleep. Right? This is one of the favours of Allah. He's reminding the Muslims that just before the battle, you all fell asleep. And it's amazing, when they're facing such huge odds, you'd think that they would be nervous, you'd think that they wouldn't sleep a wink, so Allah, caused them to sleep, some proper deep sleep where they wake up feeling refreshed. And then He sent some rain down from the sky that would cleanse them, spiritually cleanse them, physically cleanse them, right? So they feel washed, they feel new, they feel emboldened to tackle on the enemy. And as a way of creating a barrier against the whispering of the shaitan. And also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this rain made their feet firm. So it sort of was enough rain to give them a good sort of firm posture on the ground, as opposed to the rain that fell on the Qurayshi side. We talked about the miracle in that made it very muddy and sticky and wet, and they had to, they really had to make an effort to move. So you've got the differential effects of the rain on both sides, as well as the fact that they were able to sleep. And then in Ayah 12, Allah says that He's there talking to the angels. Verily, I am with you, so keep firm to those who have believed. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve. So strike them over their necks and smite them over all their fingers and toes. So again, Allah is directing His conversation to the angels that He's sending down. And again, it's just beautiful sort of image. These angels are then being told, look, you're going with this purpose. and I will already strike fear in the hearts of the disbelievers. So that again, it's that psychological warfare. It's making them feel, very negative, that this is the Quraysh. And then when the believers initiate an action, the angels have permission to complete the action. And we talked about how when some of the Sahabi would be raising their sword, they would see the heads fly off, or they'd hear the crack of the whip as they're about to strike the blow. This is the angels getting in there, but the action was initiated by the people. And Allah talks about the fact that these people have been chosen, to be killed on the battlefield, because these are the visceral enemies of Allah. It's not just the disbelievers who have a minor quarrel with the Prophet ﷺ or with aspects of the deen. These are people who, many of these people, in their heart of hearts, they know that this is the truth, that the Prophet ﷺ is the messenger of Allah and he comes with the truth, but through their own vainness or through their own sort of allegiance to jahiliyyah or tribalism, they are visceral enemies of Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. And these are the people who have been singled out for particular punishment, and that punishment is severe. And so Allah is in these 3 or 4 verses, he's relaying that particular thing, and the fact that he talks about the fingertips or every joint, that is where the whole part of them has fear and should be destroyed. Okay, so ayah 15. Again, it's possible that this was revealed early on, where Allah is saying, "Oh, you believe, when you meet those who disbelieve on the battlefield, never turn your backs. And if you do turn your back, unless it's part of a stratagem of war or to retreat, to regroup, you're going to draw upon the wrath of Allah." So again, this is warning the Muslims. Look, things may look bleak. You should not run in Scarpa. Okay, and then some of the scholars say that this verse which talks about turning your back later on in the surah has been abrogated. Saying basically, if you're outnumbered 10-1, then you might have an excuse where you can retreat or turn your back on the battlefield, but otherwise, you can't. That's not the quality of the Muslim on the battlefield. And then verse 17, where Allah again talks about, you killed them not, but Allah killed them, and when you threw, but it was Allah who threw, so that he might test the believers by a fair trial from him. Okay, so again, and that's going back to what we just mentioned in terms of the partly the angels completing the actions of the Muslims, but also when the Prophet ﷺ, he picked up just before the charge, he picked up some sand and dust and threw it. Although he initiated the action, the outcome of the action is in Allah's hands. And when you raise your sword to fight, you have your sincere intention, but the outcome is in Allah's hands. And again, this is a topic we'll cover inshallah when we talk about al-qada wal-qadar and the qadr of Allah, and the concept of free will. So the free will is initiated inside yourself with your intentions, but we don't know the outcome of what we start in terms of the initiation of the action. We don't know where it will end up. Likewise, as I said many times in the study circle, we can make the niyyah to prayer, but we do not know if we will be given permission to do the salam. So again, so this verse sort of embodies that concept. And then verse 19, it's referring to the dua that Abu Jahl made. He asked for a judgment. So, O disbelievers, if you ask for a judgment, now has the judgment come to you, and if you cease from doing wrong, it will be better for you. And if you return to the attack, so we shall return and your forces will be of no avail to you, however numerous it may be. And verily Allah is with the believers. And Abu Jahl, he's, they've gathered up the forces. He's rallying people. He's getting the propaganda. He's stoking up the fire for the fight. And he made a dua and it said, in front of the Kaaba, basic as well as on the battlefield just before battle, basically saying to Allah, pleading with Allah, but basically essentially making a dua against himself, but he didn't know, and the people who were listening didn't know. But he was basically trying to take the moral high ground and say, whoever is closer to your religion, whoever or the other way around, whoever is furthest away from your religion, whoever is the main culprit in breaking family ties and tribal bonds, and whoever has sort of done more harm, let these people fail, let these people be destroyed. So from his warped perspective, he sees as idolatry being close to Islam, as kicking out the Muslims as being the best way, and the fact that what the evil that they've done, he doesn't see it that way. But all of these things, the Muslims are closer to Allah. They're following the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. They're the ones who aren't going to fight their own kith and kin. It's the Quraysh who came to fight them and to destroy them. Explicitly, this was their war, and they're the ones who are overall doing more harm, the Quraysh, by preventing people from worshipping Allah, especially around the Kaaba. So all of these things, Abu Jahl is making a dua against himself, and Allah is referring to that here in the Qur'an. Then in ayah 20, Allah again, he's sort of referring to these Qurayshi people, saying, don't turn away from the messenger while you are hearing. Be not like those who say we've heard but they don't hear, and verily the worst of creation are like those who are deaf and dumb, those who don't understand, i.e. the disbelievers. And he's saying, look, all of these blessings that we've given people, eyes, ears, more importantly, the ability to think, aql, intellect. These guys, they have all of these things, they're blessed, but they don't use them, and so therefore they deserve to be the worst of creation. So, verily the worst of the living creatures with Allah are those who are the deaf and dumb and don't understand. Okay? And had Allah known any good in them, He would have indeed made them listen. And even if He had made them listen, they would not but have turned away, averse to the truth. So again, it sort of goes back to this visceral, deep seated hatred of the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims. And then ayah 24, Allah saying, he's calling the believers to fight against the Quraysh and fight against the Quraysh, and this is the fight of their lives. And it's not just a fight on the battlefield. It goes deeper than that. O you believe, answer Allah and His Messenger when He calls you to that which gives you life, and know that Allah comes in between a person and his heart, and verily to Him you shall all be gathered. And the fighting here is qital, it's killing, and this killing is that which gives you life, because it's the thing that brings you Islam. And this battle is a battle for Islam. It's not just a personal battle on a battlefield to you and your enemy the Quraysh. This is a battle for Islam, and it is the victory of Islam which will give you ultimate life, and not just you, but your society and the generations after you. So this is the ultimate battle, and this is predicated on you guys going out and fighting and killing the Quraysh. Okay, and if these Muslims didn't do it on the battlefield of Badr, we may not be here today. So, and Allah saying, it's Allah who can strengthen your heart, both if your heart is weak, it's Allah who gives you strength. And even if you think your heart is strong, we still need to make dua to Allah to keep our heart strong. Okay, and then ayah 25, and fear the fitna, which affects not in particular only those who do wrong, and know that Allah is severe in punishment. So essentially saying, look, trials trials happen all the time. They don't just happen to bad people. Life is always full of trials, so you've got to be prepared now and in future for this battle and future battles. That is the fitna, the affliction or trial that Allah is referring to here. Ayah 26, Allah again is reminding them, having talked about those things, and remember when you guys were few in number and you thought you were weak in the land, you were afraid that people might kidnap you, but Allah provided a safe place for you and strengthened you with His help. So he's saying, look, when you as Muslims and Prophet were in Mecca, you guys were worrying for your lives on a daily basis. You wanted to know what was, you didn't have that security. Now Allah has given you a bit of comfort in Medina and given you victory at Badr. You've got dates, you've got water, you've got security. He's taken you from your previous situation and given you the comfort of this new situation. So he's just reflecting them back where they were just a couple of years ago, and so that we can be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we should not betray Allah and His Messenger and betray our trust. Okay, and if you believe, if you obey and fear Allah, He will grant you Furqan, a criteria, and cancel out our sins. Okay. Then verse 30, Allah again is referring to a story from the Hijrah. Remember when those who disbelieved plotted against you on the night of the Hijrah, they got together in the council and they said, they locked the doors, and Shaitan entered as a Bedouin leader, and they said, look, should we imprison him? And he says, no. Should we kill him? Or should we exile him? So these were the discussions that they had. So Allah is referring directly to that. Look at your situation there. And then in ayah 31, and when our verses are recited to them, they say, we have heard this, and if we wish, we can say the like of this. This is nothing but the tales of the ancients. Okay, and also the people, the disbelievers, used to mock the Prophet and say, look, if he is promising these punishments, send down stones from the sky against us. You say these things used to happen. Do it now. Bring the punishment now, right? Bring us this painful torment. Prove to us that this is it. So this is probably a direct reference to another bin Hadith who we talked about. He was one of those who were captured in the Battle of Badr, one of the two prisoners of war who was specifically executed as they were coming back. So he wasn't those people that were killed and dumped in the well. He was taken as a prisoner of war, but because of his specific hatred and enmity to Islam, he was the one that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that would go around saying, look, why are you listening to these stories? I've got better stories. So Allah is referring and probably talking directly to him before his execution, saying, look, you used to say this, right? You used to say, bring down the punishment. Well, here, now is the punishment. Now you will face it. How could we punish you guys whilst the Prophet was living amongst you, right? So how could we send down earthquakes or a rain of stones in Makkah? We had to wait. We had to get you outside of Makkah, and there are people in Makkah who are good people who will become Muslims, and we can't destroy them either. Okay, so we needed to siphon off the evil ones, drag them out of Makkah, and this was the perfect foil. We dragged all of the really evil ones out so that we can demonstrate you our punishment. This is what you asked for. This is it now. Okay, and as I say, it's probably likely that these verses were revealed while Nadr bin Harith was still a prisoner of war, and he was listening to them, and then he was essentially executed after that. So again, Allah is mentioning, you used to say this, well, okay, here's now the punishment. Okay, and then Allah says, look, He's got every right to punish the people, whoever He likes, especially those who defile the Kaaba. And their idea of worship is just is whistling and clapping. So here Allah is taunting and mocking the Quraysh who think that they are guardians of the Masjid al-Haram, right? And their worship is so corrupt, it's so evil. They think that is worship. So Allah is saying, look, leave this to me, essentially. And that's verses 34 and 35. Ayah 36, He's referring to how the people, the Quraysh, came out to fight. These are the people who are trying to protect the Kaaba, who think it's theirs, who are defiling the Kaaba, right? Verily, those who disbelieve spend their wealth to hinder men from the path of Allah. So they will continue to spend it, but in the end it will be an anguish for them, and they will be overcome. And those who disbelieve will be gathered unto hell. And that is in order that Allah can distinguish the wicked from the good, okay, and put the wicked ones on top of another, heap them together and cast them into hell. Those are they who are losers. Okay, so there was we talked about the big fundraiser, when they heard the caravan was being attacked. They gathered all the people, they raised all the money to get for the army to protect the caravan, and then to go out and fight. So there's a big campaign, get all the money. Lots of people, especially those who hated the Muslims, donated generously, and to get the army of 1,000 strong, fully equipped with their armor. And then this was their undoing, and this was the plan that Allah had, to drag these people out, and they would, come to the end that they had. And again, He will heap them on top of each other, and that's what happened to them in the well, and that's what's going to happen when they are cast in the hellfire. And then Ayah 38. Say to those who have disbelieved, if they cease from disbelief, their past will be forgiven, and if they return, then examples of those that were punished before them that have already preceded them as a warning. They're basically saying, look, it's still not too late, right? Allah has the capacity to forgive if you are sincere and know for sure. Take for an example the people, he's talking to the Quraysh before you, like the people of Ad, the people of Thamud, the people of the Pharaoh. Look what happened to them when they persisted on evil. And then Ayah 39, and fight them until there is no more fitna, or disbelief, and the religion will be for Allah alone in the whole world. But if they cease, and then certainly Allah is all see what they do, and if they turn away, then know that Allah is your Mawla, your protector, and an excellent Mawla and an excellent helper. So here again, Allah is saying you need to fight these people who are sworn enemies of you, and you fight them until there is no more fitna, and there is no more worshipping other than Allah. That's what this refers to here. So where all the religion is for Allah, and take only Allah as your helper, as your protector, as your Mawla. Okay? And then verse 41, ayah 41, Allah then talks specifically about the spoils of war, the booty, how it's distributed, and we talked again about that last time. So at the beginning of the surah, it all belongs to Allah and His Messenger. And then it's now that we've come to the fact that this is all belong to Allah and the Messenger. Allah and His Messenger have the right to distribute it how they will. 4/5 go to the army, and then 1/5 goes to essentially the state. But of that 1/5, that 20%, a fifth of the fifth, right, goes to the Prophet ﷺ, a fifth goes to his near relatives, a fifth goes to the orphans, a fifth goes to the poor, the masakin, and a fifth goes to the wayfarer. So that's the distribution of the booty. Ayah 42 talks about when the Muslim army were on the near side, the closer side. When they got to Badr, they got there on the Thursday night, closer to Medina. They camped in front of the well, and the Quraysh camped on the opposite side, and the caravan was on the lower ground. So that had gone to the coastal area to bypass the battlefield. Okay. And then, and we talked about this before, Allah saying, look, if you had made a mutual appointment to meet, you would certainly have failed in that appointment. But you met that Allah might accomplish a matter that was already ordained, so that those who were to be destroyed might be destroyed after a clear evidence, and those who were to live, like the believers, might live after a clear evidence. And we said how even if the Quraysh and the Prophet ﷺ had sent delegations and had said, look, we're going to meet and fight, on this day, at this time, at this point in, a place, let's sort it out. That would never have happened. The Muslims would have found an excuse, the Quraysh would have found an excuse, they would have missed each other, they wouldn't have been a proper battle, but this was the planning of Allah to drag the Muslims out, only a small number of them, for the caravan, but actually for the army. And the caravan was used as an excuse to draw out the most evil from the Quraysh, so that there would be this fight. And there was no other way. Allah knew that, had it been left to the sons of Adam, there would not have been this battle. So, Ayah 43, Allah is talking about how, and remember, Allah showed them to you as few, in your dream. So the night before, when the Prophet ﷺ, he nodded off, after making dua, he nodded off for a bit, and then he saw the number of the Quraysh on the battlefield to be few in number. So that gave him sort of inner strength, okay? So he wouldn't be discouraged. And Allah says He is the knower of what is in the breasts. So He's there giving, psychological support to the Muslims, and especially to the Prophet ﷺ. And then the next ayah, verse 44, and remember when you met the armies on the day of Badr, He showed them to you as few in your eyes, and He made you as few in their eyes, so that Allah might accomplish a matter already ordained, and to Allah return all matters for decision. If the Muslims had seen the army in their real strength, as individuals or as a group, then they would have despaired. There would have been chaos. They may not have gone through with the battle. And if the Quraysh had seen the Muslims as they were, again, they would have treated it slightly differently. But Allah had to play these mind games to make sure that the people would actually meet and fight. So you can see the narrative in this surah so far is, look, you guys, were doing almost everything to avoid getting together and fighting, and it was Allah through these, His perfect planning that ensured all of these things would happen. And Allah knows all outcomes, and He knows that unless He show people these dreams, embolden them, and cast terror here, etc., these things would not have happened. So there's a lot of things going behind the scenes that we're not aware of, but Allah is now telling us this was part of the plan all along. So, so those things were really important. And then ayah 45, O you who believe, when you meet the enemy force, take a firm stand against them and remember the name of Allah much, so that you may be successful. Essentially saying, and again, this is a lesson for us, we need to do dhikr, right? In tongue and in mind, in times of trial. This is the ultimate success, and this is a way of emboldening the people just before the fight. You do zikr, remember Allah, and you will be successful. And obey Allah and His Messenger, and do not dispute, with one another, lest you lose courage and your strength departs, and be patient. Surely Allah is with the patient. Again, these are the types of verses that will be used just before the battle to strengthen the people. Okay, and he's saying, look, don't fight amongst yourselves, because internal strife is disunity is a cause for defeat of Muslims, right? And not just on the battlefield, but politically as well, or in the community, or in society. When we are not united, it's easy for the enemies to take advantage of us. So our strength comes through that unity. Okay. And then Allah in Ayah 47 is talking about, and don't be like those who came out of their homes boastfully, the Quraysh, when they were leaving Makkah with all the finery, with all their armor, with all their pomp. They were there saying, look, we're definitely gonna, of course we're going to win, right? And they were really proud of it, and we'll come and we'll defeat them, and this will be the end of Muhammad. And they had that pride amongst them, and Allah said, look, don't be like this, right? And then he then looks how Shaitan tricked the people, tricked the Quraysh. And Ayah 48, and remember when Shaitan made their evil deeds seem fair to them, and said, look, no, none of mankind can overcome you, and I'm your neighbor, I'm here. So when the story when Iblis transformed himself, shape-shifted into Surah Malik, and said, don't worry, Banu Kinana is not going to attack the Quraysh. You have my personal guarantee. Yet, when the two forces came in sight of each other, he ran away. So he could see the angels descending from the skies, because obviously he's jinn, and then he flew, or he fled, right? And people tried to stop him and said, where are you going? You promised you'd stay, and then he pushed them back and they flew in the air. Okay, so this is referring to that. And then Ayah 49, when the hypocrites and those whose hearts was the disease said, these people, Muslims, are deceived by their religion, but whoever puts his trust in Allah, then surely Allah is Almighty or wise. Talking about, well, this is the real religion, don't listen to the propaganda. And Ayahs 50-51, talking about the angels taking away the souls of those who disbelieve at their death, smiting them their faces and their backs, saying, taste the punishment of the blazing fire. This is because of that which your own hands had forwarded, and verily Allah is not unjust to His slaves. So the evil that men do, it's through their own actions, through their own intentions. We bring about our own destruction by not listening to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We make our own choices, and we reap what we sow. This is what this is referring to. And again, Ayah 52, there's reference to Pharaoh, and it's apt that Allah talks about, similar to the behavior of the people of Pharaoh and of those before them who rejected the ayahs. And the Prophet ﷺ referred to Abu Jahl as the Pharaoh of his people, right? So again, these verses refer to that. And then moving on, we've got Ayah 56. There are those with whom you've made a covenant, but they break their covenant every time, and they do not fear Allah. So if you gain the mastery over them in war, punish them severely in order to disperse those who are behind them, so they can learn a lesson. And if you fear treachery from any people, throw back their covenant to them and be on equal terms. Certainly Allah does not like the treacherous, and let not the disbelievers think that they can outstrip the punishment. They can't save themselves from Allah. So again, the scholar says this is referring to the conquest of Makkah, and to just a general theme in political life, essentially, that if you make treaties, you stick to them. And if we feel that the other party is not being truthful to the treaty, we need to publicly denounce or annul the treaty, right? And we can't act treacherous and keep it secret and then suddenly surprise attack them and say, well, we already cancelled the treaty. That's pure treachery. That's Allah does not like the treacherous. You can't break these treaties, these oaths that you've made, even in war. War is deception, so you can do trickery in your tactics, but you don't break your oaths, right? That's not allowed. Okay, so when you make a treaty, you need to publicly announce its annulment to both sides, and then you move forward because of that. Okay. Ayah 60, Allah talks about and make ready against them all you can of power, including steeds of war, to threaten the enemy of Allah and your enemy and others besides whom you may not know, but Allah does know. And whatever you shall spend in the cause of Allah shall be repaid to you, and you shall not be treated unjustly. So you essentially show your strength. And show your strength to your known enemies and to your unknown enemies, because Allah knows them. You need to strike terror in and fear in the eyes of the enemy. Okay, so they've got to see who they're dealing with, and you've got to have that posturing that's important, especially at times of war. And then, if they incline to peace, then you incline to peace, okay? And if they intend to deceive you, then Allah will sort them out. So the reason for war, a just war, is to spread Islam, is to create the environment where Islam and da'wah can be propagated. War is not the first, it's not your first instinct, it's not where you start. War is at the very end, when you've exhausted all other things. And if they incline to peace, then incline to peace as well. So that is how you do realpolitik. Okay, and if they are then deceitful, Allah, you're not to know that, but Allah is knowing that, and Allah will sort that out. And then the important and famous Ayah 63, Allah says, had He, Allah, not united the believers' hearts, if you had spent, it is He who united their hearts, if you had spent all that is in the earth, you could not have united their hearts, but Allah united them. And this victory only came because Allah brought the hearts of the believers together. Unity is a cause for victory. Unity is important. And even if the son of Adam had spent all the wealth in the world, he would not have been in that position to actually melt the hearts of the Muhajir and the Ansar, so much so that they were willing to do battle on that day against the Quraysh. And it was Allah who did that. And in the next ayah, Allah is sufficient for you. And then talking about sufficiency, the next few ayahs are talking about, urge the believers to fight. If there are 20 steadfast, they will overcome 200. If there are 100 steadfast, they will overcome 1,000. So a ratio of 1 to 10 Muslims to non-Muslims sincerely on the battlefield. That is the criteria Allah uses. He knows that if there are 10, they will overcome 100. But then he lessens the ratio a bit, so he knows what we're like. And then he basically, the next ayah is round. So if you are 100 steadfast, you shall overcome 200. And if there are 1,000, you'll overcome 2,000. The believer of Allah. Allah is with the patient one. So that's and other scholars say, that's the bit that was sort of abrogated in the earlier verse around turning you back when you've got overwhelming odds, and then the odds shorten here. And then we've talked before about Ayah 67, where Allah says about the prisoners of war, it's not appropriate that a prophet should have prisoners of war and free them with ransom until he's made a great slaughter amongst the enemies in the land. You desire the good of this world, but Allah desires for you the hereafter. And again, you need to, if it's your first battle, you need to establish your power, your dominion, your authority, your strength, and you demonstrate that to your enemies by being, ruthless with them when you have these prisoners of war, so they get the message across. Okay, so that was the criticism of the Prophet ﷺ when he chose ransoming over executing the prisoners of war. And then the next verse, were not for the fact that the previous ordainment from Allah, a severe torment would have touched you for what you took. And where we've talked before about how Allah said, look, had it not been for that, allowed you to ransom and take the spoils of war, you made the wrong choice, essentially, and we would have punished you. And the scholars have said that what had been allowed was either Allah had already decreed that this was the choice the Prophet was going to make, or he's doing this without knowledge, or the fact that he'd allowed the Ummah to have prisoners of war and war booty. That general allowance was there, therefore it was okay for the Prophet technically to take that choice, but it wasn't the best choice to make in these circumstances. And again, it's all to do with these circumstances. And then we're getting to the last few ayahs, and so now that you can have the booty and you know how it's distributed, ayah 69 is, so enjoy what you have gotten from the booty of war, lawful and good. And he's just making it clear that it may not have been allowed for the ummahs before you, but now you can, and enjoy it. And then ayah 70, O Prophet, say to the captors that in your hand, if Allah knows any good in your heart, he will give you something better than that what has been taken from you, and he will forgive you, and Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. And we talked how Al-Abbas said he swore that this verse was revealed about him and referred to him. Okay, so don't be afraid of losing wealth. Allah's going to give you far more than just mere wealth. He will give you back your wealth and much more, but he will give you so much more than wealth, the akhirah and everything else, right? And ayah 71, but if they intend to betray you, they've already betrayed Allah before. So he gave you power over them. Allah is the all-knower, the all-wise. And some say this is in reference to some of the prisoners of war who did indeed betray the Prophet ﷺ, as Allah is predicting here. And he will sort them out. These people who will come back and fight you, don't worry about them. They've betrayed you, they've betrayed Allah, we will sort them out. And we talked about the story, and we'll talk about one of them in particular at the end of Battle of Uhud. And then right at the end, ayah 72, Allah is basically saying now that following the Battle of Badr, truth and falsehood have been sifted. There is no excuse now. The people who are left in Medina, people who are left in Makkah who claim to be Muslims, it is obligatory for them to make the emigration. Okay, if they stay back, then the Prophet ﷺ has no legal duty to protect them. Now that the battle has happened, if there should be no Muslims left in Makkah, it is compulsory on them to do hijrah. Okay, and if they stay back, then the Prophet ﷺ has no obligation to help them out. Okay, and then Allah then talks about if they ask for help, then help them, except if you have a treaty with others. So again, sort of a general ruling here in terms of if people are asking for help, it is our duty to help them, except if these people can't help, ask for help when you've already given your oath or a treaty to people that you're not going to help them. So you've got to stick to your treaties essentially, but the people who are left in Makkah, they need to move. And ayah 73, and those who disbelieve are allies to one another, essentially saying basically Muslims need to unite, and that's our strength. We need to unite. We have to unite politically to demonstrate our strength, and we're so disunited nowadays, but in order, Muslims need to unite and know that despite the fact, and this ayah talk, despite the fact that your enemies are numerous and they have very different ways of doing things, they're very disparate, they will unite in a commonality against the Muslims. We saw that in the time of Rasulullah, we saw that afterwards, and we're seeing that today. Even though there are disputes amongst the non-believers, one thing that unites them is the hatred of Islam, and they will come together to fight the Muslims. Okay, so it is important here that the Muslims stay united. Okay, and then the final two verses, Allah saying that basically 74, essentially, the earlier you became Muslim, the higher you rank. And we talk about this. There are gradings, there are rankings of the Muslims. Those who believed and emigrated and strove hard in the cause of Allah, al-Jihad, as well as those who gave them asylum and aid, the Ansar, they are believers in truth. For them, forgiveness and a generous provision. Okay, so the ones who came after that, their rank is slightly lower. And the very last verse, ayah 75, the scholars say annulled a clause of the mu'aqad, the bond of brotherhood. And we talked about this many weeks ago. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that he made people actual brothers, so they would inherit from each other. And then this verse came, so basically, so the Muhajir and the Ansar would inherit each from each other as real brothers and families. But Allah is saying here that families are closer when it comes to inheritance. So that aspect of brotherhood was now annulled. Now that they've got some ghanima, they've got some wealth, they can stand on their own 2 feet, there's no need for inheritance from each other. So that aspect of the brotherhood has now been annulled. So these, I know we've gone over time, apologies for that, but it's important to quickly go through some of the verses of Surah Anfal, and I do hope that people will read these verses again in Arabic and in translation, and we've got a better understanding of how each of these verses refer to what aspects of the Battle of Badr, and it will increase our love of the Seerah, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahabi, and our love of the Qur'an, and to see how the two work together. So that's why I wanted to spend this session just going through the whole surah, albeit briefly. But again, we can reference it to the stories that we've already been going through. So I'll finish there, inshallah. And inshallah, next time we'll talk about the lessons from the Battle of Badr, and maybe move on to another event in terms of Banu Qaynuqa, or an introduction to that. But finally, do send in any questions that you have, comments or queries. Do subscribe, if you can, to the YouTube channel, the Study Circle channel, and do remember us and the Ummah in your du'as, please. So we'll finish there. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.